Her parents sold her because of infertility, until the Alpha King chose her above all. The wind howled across the jagged cliffs of Eldoria, carrying with it the scent of the cold sea and the whisper of ancient secrets. In a small, crumbling manor perched at the edge of the kingdom, Alara sat alone in a dim chamber. Her fingers traced the grooves in the wooden window frame, worn smooth by generations of hands. The sky above was a bruised purple, fading into black, and the first stars of evening blinked faintly. Her parents, once proud nobles, had grown restless and bitter. They had spent years chasing heirs, seeking the line of their blood to continue, and with every year that passed without a child, their patience thinned like the candle flames in the manor. Alara, their only daughter, had been born healthy, beautiful even, but infertile. The word haunted their hearts like a curse, though no one dared speak it aloud. Tonight the shadow of that unspoken truth fell over her. "Alara," her mother called, her voice brittle, edged with both fear and cold calculation. "It is time." Alara looked up, confusion clouding her tired eyes. Time for what? Her father's hands, rough and lined, held a small velvet pouch. "You are to go to Kalen, the Alpha King of the Northern Lands. He chooses what he desires, and we are to give you to him. Your worth, your life, it is nothing without a lineage." Alara's chest tightened. She had heard rumors of Kalen, the man whose shadow stretched across kingdoms, whose gaze alone could command obedience, whose presence made courtiers bow in silent fear. Yet to be given as a prize, as though she were a thing to be traded, felt like a blade twisting in her heart. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why would anyone want someone like me?" Her mother's face was pale, eyes glinting with a mixture of sorrow and greed. "Because even the Alpha King seeks the rare and the remarkable. You are both, whether you believe it or not. Do not speak. You must go." The journey began at dawn. Cloaked in layers to hide her trembling, Alara rode through forests painted gold and crimson by autumn, over mountains that scraped the clouds, and across rivers that shimmered like silver threads in the morning light. Guards accompanied her, silent men in iron, faces obscured by helmets, leaving her alone with her racing thoughts. She thought of the life she was leaving behind, the crumbling manor, the cold eyes of her parents, the empty halls echoing with memories of laughter she would never have again. And she thought of the unknown, a fortress looming in the distance, filled with whispers, rumors, and shadows. When she arrived, the castle of Kalen rose like a storm against the sky. Black stone towers spiraled upward, their sharp edges cutting the clouds, and banners of silver and crimson rippled in the wind. A chill ran down her spine as she was led through the heavy iron gates, past courtiers whose eyes lingered too long, their curiosity edged with suspicion and fear. Kalen was waiting. He was nothing like the rumors suggested, less monster, more force of nature. His presence was immense, filling the great hall without effort. He stood tall, shoulders broad, cloaked in deep midnight blue, and his eyes were an intense shade of stormy gray, piercing and unreadable. When he looked at her, Alara felt as if he could see through every thought, every fear she tried to hide. "You are Alara," he said, his voice low, smooth, and commanding, carrying a weight that seemed to bend the air. "Your parents sent you because they see only what you lack. But his gaze lingered and Alara shivered. "I see what they cannot." She wanted to ask what he meant, but words caught in her throat. Fear, confusion, and something else, something magnetic, rooted her in place. "You will stay here in my court," Kalen continued. "Not as a servant, not as a trophy, but as someone I have chosen." Shock, disbelief, and a flicker of hope tangled in Alara's chest. Chosen by the Alpha King, by this man who seemed like a storm waiting to break. She wanted to flee, to scream, to demand that her life was her own, but the power in his presence held her silent, almost reverent. The days that followed were strange and confining. Alara was given a room at the top of the tallest tower, overlooking the cliffs and the endless sea beyond. Its walls were lined with books and trinkets, tokens of a life she could never have imagined. Servants brought her food and clothing, always respectful, yet their eyes betrayed curiosity. Who was she, really, that Kaelin would claim her above all others? Kaelin visited her often, but never too often. His presence was a study in contrasts, demanding yet patient, cold yet strangely attentive. He asked her questions about the world, about her mind, about what she dreamed, and he listened when she answered. Yet she could never read his thoughts. There was a darkness in him, a shadow of old pain and fierce loyalty to his people, but also an echo of longing, like a song half remembered. One evening, a week after her arrival, she wandered to the balcony of her tower. The moon was a silver crescent casting a pale glow over the jagged cliffs. Waves crashed below, furious and untamed. Alara felt her heart ache, missing the life she had known, even the cruelty of her parents' eyes. A soft voice broke the silence. "Do you fear me?" she turned. Kaelin was there, shadowed by the moonlight, but his gaze was not threatening. It was searching. I do not know you," she admitted. "I fear what I do not understand." He nodded, stepping closer, yet not crossing the boundary she had not invited him to cross. "Many fear me," he said, "not because I am cruel, but because the world is cruel. I have done things, seen things that make men tremble. You should not fear me, Alara. You should fear losing yourself." Her chest tightened. His words were strange comfort and warning all at once. The truth of her own situation pressed against her heart. Her parents had sold her, yes, but Kaelin, he had chosen her, for reasons she could not yet fathom. "You could leave," he said suddenly, his tone almost casual. "I would not stop you." Alara looked at him, astonished. "Leave, but you chose me." He let out a sound, almost a laugh, but heavy with irony and something else, something deeper. "Perhaps I did, but I do not own you. I can protect you, teach you, guide you, but you must choose to stay or your life remains theirs." She understood then. He was testing her, not just her obedience, but her courage, her heart. She had been sold once. She would not sell herself again. I will stay," she whispered, though her voice was small, trembling. "Because I want to, because I choose to." Kaelin's storm-gray eyes softened in a way that almost seemed human, almost tender. But before she could hope for more, a howl ripped through the night. It came from the cliffs, the wind carrying the sound like a cry from the edge of the world. Kaelin stiffened, his body moving before his mind could even think. "Stay inside," he ordered, though his eyes never left hers. "Do not come out until I return." Alara watched as he vanished into the darkness, a figure of shadow and strength moving toward the source of the howl. She felt a strange pull in her chest, a mixture of fear, awe, and something that might be hope. Alone on the balcony, she looked down at the cliffs, at the black waves roaring below. She thought of her parents, of the life they had tried to force upon her, of the world that had deemed her worthless. And yet, here she was, chosen by a man whose very name commanded kingdoms, whose presence made even the night itself seem smaller. A wind gusted past her, cold and wild, carrying a whisper that seemed almost like a promise. "You are more than they ever believed. You are yours now." Alara pressed her hands to the stone railing, staring out into the darkness, heart racing. She did not know what awaited her in the days to come, in the halls of the Alpha King, or in the shadows beyond the castle walls. But for the first time, she felt a spark of something forbidden and daring, belonging. And then from the cliffs below, a shadow moved, fast, powerful, impossible to catch with the eye alone. A wolf, or something more, her breath caught in her throat. Kaelin would return, she knew, but not alone. And in the depths of her chest, Alara realized, her life, her destiny had just begun. The wind carried his voice back to her, faint but unmistakable. She did not yet know what being chosen truly meant, but she would face it, whatever it was. The castle was alive with whispers, shadows, and secrets, and the Alpha King's choice had set into motion a story that no one, not even Alara herself, could yet predict. And in that moment, standing alone on the tower balcony, she understood one thing clearly. This was only the beginning. The dawn broke over the cliffs of Kaelin's fortress like fire spilling across black stone. Alara stood at the edge of her tower room, watching the first light touch the waves below. The howl from the night before still echoed faintly in her memory, and with it, a strange thrill, a mix of fear and fascination. The Alpha King, Kaelin, had faced whatever had lurked in the darkness, and she had been left alone with only her thoughts, her heart hammering like a drum in her chest. The castle was a world unlike any she had ever known. Its halls were tall and grand, lined with stone statues whose eyes seemed almost alive in the flicker of torches. The corridors twisted and turned in ways that made her feel both lost and safe, as though the castle itself protected those who dwelled within it. Servants moved silently, their whispers like shadows skimming the walls, always watching, always respectful, yet tinged with curiosity. Alara had learned quickly that the court was a dangerous place. Noble families and advisors whispered behind closed doors, eyes flicking to her whenever she entered. Many assumed she would be weak, a pawn in Kaelin's games. Few understood that she had endured far worse, a family that had sold her for status, a life that had deemed her worthless, and yet here she was, standing, unbroken. Kaelin appeared in her chamber before breakfast. His entrance was quiet, almost imperceptible, yet she felt the shift in the room immediately. He stood tall, cloaked in dark blue, and his gray eyes held the storm that had first unsettled her, tempered now with something almost like care. "You did not sleep well," he said. His voice was low, steady, carrying the weight of command. Alara shook her head. "I did not sleep at all." He stepped closer, his gaze scanning the horizon before settling on her again. "The night is full of things you do not yet understand. You must learn to see without fear or the world will consume you," she frowned. "Teach me then, show me how not to be afraid." Kaelin's lips twitched into the faintest shadow of a smile. "Very well, come with me." He led her through corridors she had never noticed, down spiral staircases that seemed to descend into the very heart of the castle, and finally into the castle's inner courtyard. Here, the air was colder, tinged with salt and the scent of wild herbs that grew among the stones. Wolves prowled along the edge of the forest, their eyes glowing like lanterns in the dim light. "This is the northern court," Kaelin said, his tone calm but authoritative. "The land beyond is wild, dangerous. You must learn to move among it as I do to understand it." Alara's eyes followed the movement in the shadows. They are not ordinary wolves." "No," Kaelin admitted. "They are guardians, part of my world, part of my bloodline. They see things others cannot. They sense truth, loyalty, and deception." Her heart raced. She had been raised with tales of kings and warriors, but nothing had prepared her for this. Creatures loyal to a man whose power was almost mythical. And yet, the Alpha King moved among them without fear, as if they were extensions of his own spirit. "Do you trust me?" he asked suddenly, stepping closer, his presence overwhelming. Alara hesitated. Trust was a dangerous thing, especially with someone who held so much power over her life. But she remembered the night when he had chosen her, spoken her name above all others. And despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, she felt a strange pull in her chest, a thread connecting her to him. I want to," she whispered. Kaelin nodded once. "Good, then watch and learn." For hours, he guided her through the courtyard, teaching her to move with awareness, to read the subtle signs of the wild. How the wind carried messages, how the shadows could hide danger, how even the silence of the forest could speak volumes. Alara listened, absorbed every detail, her mind and body learning a new rhythm. And through it all, Kaelin's eyes never left her, always watching, always assessing. By evening she was exhausted, but something inside her had awakened, a spark of strength, a sense of purpose she had never known. Kaelin did not speak of emotion, love, or desire. He spoke of survival, understanding, and power. Yet in every gesture, every glance, there was a silent acknowledgement of her presence, her courage, her emerging self. The next day, whispers reached her ears, a prophecy carried by one of the elder advisors. The one who was cast away shall awaken the king's true heart or shatter his throne. Elara's blood ran cold. Was it about her? Could a life like hers, discarded and rejected, truly hold the fate of a kingdom in her hands? She wanted to laugh, to deny the idea, but deep down she felt the truth of it. She had been chosen. She was no longer invisible. That night, Kalen came to her again, moving through the darkness with the silence of a shadow. He did not knock. He simply appeared, as if the walls themselves had led him to her. "They speak of a prophecy," she said, hesitant, unsure if she dared voice it aloud. Kalen's expression darkened. "Prophecies are dangerous. They shape hearts, stir ambition, and poison the weak. Do not let them shape yours." "But it could be true," she said. "What if it is about me?" He moved closer, the shadows framing him like a living storm. "Then you must decide what you will do with it. Fear will bind you. Courage will free you. And you, Elara, you have already shown courage." Her heart swelled at his words, a mixture of fear and hope twisting within her. She realized then that the castle, the wolves, the Alpha King, they were all tests, challenges not just to her body but to her mind, her heart. Days passed and Elara learned quickly. She walked the courtyards, watched the shadows, studied the court, and observed Kalen's ways. She discovered the loyalty he commanded, the quiet fear of those who challenged him, and the respect of those who served him faithfully. Yet beneath the power she sensed pain, a loneliness so deep it seemed carved into his bones. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, painting the sky in fire and blood, Elara ventured toward the forest's edge. She wanted to see the world Kalen ruled, the land that shaped him. The wolves were there, watching silently, their eyes gleaming in the fading light. She felt the same thrill she had felt on her first night, fear and fascination intertwined, a heartbeat against the wild. A sudden rustle made her stop. The shadows moved unnaturally, faster than any animal should. Her heart raced. Then a figure emerged, a shadow larger than any wolf, with glowing eyes and teeth that glinted in the moonlight. Before she could react, Kalen appeared. He moved with impossible speed, placing himself between her and the creature. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steadying her as he assessed the threat. "Stay behind me," he ordered, calm yet commanding. "Do not move unless I tell you." The creature circled, testing, watching, and Kalen's stance shifted, a silent language of protection and power. Elara watched in awe, understanding for the first time that this man was not merely a ruler. He was a force of nature, a storm contained in human form. The encounter ended as quickly as it had begun. The shadow retreated into the forest, leaving only the echoes of its growl behind. Kalen turned to her, gray eyes intense. "You survived," he said. "Not just the night, but yourself. That is rare." Elara's chest heaved. I was afraid." "And yet you faced it," he replied. "That is courage, not absence of fear. Remember that." For the first time, Elara realized that courage was not about never feeling fear. It was about standing even when fear consumed you. And in that understanding, a new bond formed between her and the Alpha King, forged not through words, but through shared danger and silent trust. That night, as she lay in her tower room, Elara thought of the prophecy again. She wondered if her destiny was already written, or if she had the power to shape it. The shadows outside the window danced with the wind, carrying the distant calls of the wolves. Somewhere in the forest, Kalen moved among them, a guardian, a storm, a king. And she, once sold and discarded, was now a part of this world, a world that demanded courage, demanded strength, and promised transformation. As sleep finally claimed her, a shadow moved in the courtyard below, a figure watching the tower with eyes that glinted in the moonlight. Elara's heart stirred in her chest, a mix of fear and excitement. She did not yet know who it was, but one thing was certain. The night held more secrets than she had ever imagined, and the Alpha King's world was only beginning to reveal itself. The wind whispered against the stone, carrying a message as old as the mountains. The chosen must walk the shadows, or the shadows will consume them. Alara tightened her hands around the blanket, feeling the weight of her new life pressing upon her. She had been sold once, but now she was chosen. And whatever the night, the forest, or destiny itself had in store, she knew she would face it, fear, shadows, and all with courage. And somewhere in the darkness, Kaelin's eyes watched, unwavering, waiting for the moment when Alara would truly understand the depths of the world she had stepped into, and the part she would play in his heart, his court, and his kingdom. The castle felt different in the early morning light. Shadows stretched along the stone corridors, long and sharp, as though they were warning her. Alara moved quietly, careful not to disturb the servants sweeping the courtyards or the guards practicing drills. But today, she was not afraid of the castle's corridors or the looming towers. She was beginning to understand them. Kaelin had begun to teach her more than just survival or awareness of the wild. He had begun teaching her the rules of the court, the power behind words, the meaning behind gestures, and the importance of reading people before they could deceive her. But he did not just teach her the court. He taught her the kingdom, and slowly he was teaching her his heart. Alara was changing. She no longer felt like the girl sold for her worth. She felt like a part of something larger, something dangerous and beautiful at the same time. And Kaelin was at the center of it, a stormy presence that both frightened and fascinated her. It was in the library that the tension first surfaced. The walls were lined with books and scrolls, some ancient, some filled with the history of the northern lands. Alara had been reading quietly when Kaelin appeared, his cloak brushing the floor, his eyes clouded with thought. "Alara," he said, his voice soft, almost hesitant, "you are learning faster than I expected, but knowledge alone is not enough." She looked up, curious. "What else must I learn?" "Trust," he said, "and courage. True courage is not the absence of fear. It is facing the fear that binds you and still acting. The court will test you, the kingdom will test you, and I will test you as well. If you fail, lives will be lost." Her heart thumped, but she did not shrink. "I will not fail," she whispered. Kaelin studied her for a moment, as though weighing the truth in her words. Then, without warning, he shifted his expression into something unreadable and left the room, leaving her with a shiver. The next days brought challenges unlike anything she had imagined. Courtiers watched her closely, some with suspicion, some with curiosity, others with jealousy. One of Kaelin's advisors, Lord Murrin, a man sharp with ambition and cold with calculation, seemed determined to make her falter. He questioned her decisions, mocked her understanding of the court, and even whispered to others that she was unworthy of Kaelin's attention. Alara felt anger rise in her chest, a flame that refused to be snuffed out. She remembered her parents' betrayal, the way they had sold her like she was nothing. She would not allow this man or any other to treat her as less than she was. Kaelin, ever observant, noticed the change. One evening he led her to the highest tower, the one overlooking the cliffs and the roaring sea below. The wind whipped at their cloaks, tugging at their hair, but he did not speak at first. He simply watched the horizon, as though the stormy sea held secrets he sought. "You are angry," he said finally, his voice carrying over the wind. "Do not let them see it. Anger can be dangerous when wielded without control." "I am not afraid of them," she said. "I have lived worse. I will not bow to whispers or fear. I will stand." Kaelin turned his storm-gray eyes on her, a mixture of admiration and warning in his gaze. "Good. That is why I chose you. You are stronger than you know, but strength alone will not save you. You must learn to act with patience, wisdom, and understanding of power." Before she could respond, a shout echoed from the courtyard. Alara's heart leaped. Kaelin's head snapped toward the noise, and she saw it, a group of armored men moving with purpose, their eyes fixed on the tower. "Stay here," he commanded, and without waiting for her answer, he vanished down the stairs with the speed of a shadow. Alara's breath caught. She wanted to run after him, to follow him, but she remembered his words about patience and observation. She stayed, pressing herself against the stone wall, and watched as the courtyard became a scene of chaos. Lord Murren had gathered his supporters, men loyal to his ambition, and was advancing toward the tower. They believed Kaelin vulnerable, that he would not anticipate their attack, but Kaelin was never vulnerable. He emerged from the shadows, his sword flashing in the sunlight, moving with precision and deadly grace. Alara's heart pounded as she watched him fight, every movement controlled, every strike purposeful. The men who had thought to challenge the Alpha King were driven back, retreating in fear and confusion. When the courtyard fell silent, Kaelin turned and saw her watching. His expression softened, a shadow of a smile flickering across his face. "You saw that," he said. "Good. Courage is not only in action, it is in understanding. You must see, learn, and act when the time comes. The court, like the forest, is full of shadows. You will face them." Alara nodded, her pulse still racing. "I understand," she said, though her voice was trembling. The days that followed were a mixture of training, observation, and quiet reflection. Alara began to notice the subtleties of Kaelin's world, the loyalty of his people, the depth of his power, the loneliness he carried even as he ruled. And slowly, almost without her realizing it, she began to care for him, not just as a protector or king, but as a man whose pain mirrored her own. It was during one of these evenings that she discovered the prophecy's true weight. The castle's eldest advisor, a woman named Isolde, spoke to her quietly in the gardens. "You are not just chosen, child," Isolde said, her voice soft but firm. "You hold a key. Kaelin has lived in darkness for too long. You may awaken something in him that even he has forgotten. But beware, the court will not all welcome you. Some will try to destroy you before you even realize your power." Alara felt the truth of those words settle over her. She had been sold, cast aside, and yet now she was not only part of the kingdom but part of a story that could change its fate. Fear and excitement danced in her chest, and she knew she had to be ready. Then, one night, the threat became real. As the castle slept, a messenger arrived in haste, breathless, panicked. "My lord," the young man shouted, bowing before Kaelin. "The northern villages, they have been attacked. Raiders, strange creatures, many are missing or dead." Kaelin's eyes darkened instantly, storm clouds gathering in their depths. He turned to Alara, his voice low and commanding. "You must come. Now." Alara's heart raced, but she followed him without hesitation. Together they rode through the night, the wind biting at their faces, the wolves of the northern lands running alongside them, moving like shadows through the darkness. The villages were in chaos. Smoke rose in thin ribbons, the air filled with the cries of the terrified and the wounded. Alara saw Kaelin in action, calm, precise, authoritative. He moved among the villagers, commanding, protecting, striking fear into those who would harm the innocent. And through it all, he never lost sight of her. "Alara," he said as they reached a small hill overlooking the village, "the world is not kind and power comes with responsibility. Today, you will see why courage matters. Will you stand with me?" Her hands clenched into fists, her pulse steadying. "Yes," she said, "I will stand with you." Kaelin's eyes softened just slightly, and together they descended into the village. They fought not with swords alone, but with strategy, wit, and courage. Alara found herself guiding villagers to safety, using knowledge she had learned from Kaelin about observation and patience. She felt alive, powerful, a part of the world that had once seemed beyond her reach. But just as victory seemed within reach, a shadow moved in the corner of her vision, a figure cloaked in black, faster than any man should be. Before she could react, a blade struck Kaelin from behind, sending him to the ground with a grunt of pain. "Alara," he shouted, and she froze, horror flooding her heart. She acted without thinking, running to him, grabbing a fallen branch and confronting the shadow. The attacker retreated, but not before whispering words that chilled her to the bone. "The king's choice will die tonight." Kalen struggled to rise, pain etched across his face, but his hand found hers, steadying her. "Do not fear," he said, his voice strained but strong. "Courage, Alara, remember it. You are stronger than you know." Tears burned her eyes, but she nodded. She had been sold, betrayed, and tested, but she would not let this darkness win. She would fight for him, for the kingdom, and for herself. As the village quieted and dawn approached, Alara realized the truth. She was no longer merely the girl who had been sold. She was a part of Kalen's world, a force in her own right, and the prophecy's shadow hung heavy over them both. And somewhere in the distant forest, unseen, more shadows moved, watching, waiting, testing. Alara pressed her hand against Kalen's shoulder, feeling the warmth beneath the storm of pain. "We will survive this," she whispered. Kalen's eyes, gray and stormy, softened just a fraction. "Yes," he said, "but the night is far from over, and neither is the path you must walk." The wind howled through the village, carrying the scent of smoke, the cries of the frightened, and the promise of challenges yet to come. Alara understood then that courage was only the beginning. And destiny, like the wind, would not wait for anyone. The first light of dawn crept across the cliffs of Kalen's kingdom, painting the fortress in gold and shadow. Smoke still lingered from the night's attack, curling into the sky like fingers reaching for the sun. Alara stood on the balcony of her tower, the wind tugging at her cloak, her heart still pounding from the chaos of the past days. The village below was quiet now, but she knew it was only the calm before the next storm. Kalen had been wounded during the raid, and though his strength was immense, the shadow of the attack lingered. She could see it in his eyes, the weight of responsibility, the lingering pain, and the silent question he always carried. Could anyone truly stand beside him? Alara's hand tightened around the stone railing. She had been sold once, abandoned by the family who should have loved her. But now she was no longer a pawn. She had fought, learned, and survived. She had faced fear, shadows, and even the court's whispers, and she had stood with Kalen. The prophecy whispered around them still, but now it felt less like a warning and more like a challenge. Kalen appeared beside her, his steps quiet but certain. His gray eyes, still clouded with the remnants of pain, softened as they met hers. "You have changed," he said, "not just in strength or courage, but in heart. You are no longer just the one I chose. You are the one I trust." Alara met his gaze. "I learned from the best," she said, a small, confident smile forming on her lips. He allowed himself a faint chuckle, the first in days. "And now you must lead. There are more dangers coming, those who would see the kingdom fall, those who would harm what we protect. Will you stand with me?" Her chest lifted with resolve. "Always." The next hours were a blur of preparation and strategy. Kalen and Alara moved through the castle together, rallying the loyal guards, organizing defenses, and sending word to neighboring villages to prepare for any further attacks. The court, still wary of Alara, watched as she demonstrated intelligence, courage, and calm authority. Even Lord Murren, who had sought to undermine her, could not ignore the truth. She was no ordinary girl, and her bond with Kalen gave her strength no one could match. Alara's mind raced with plans. She had seen how Kalen led in battle, how he understood the land, the people, and even the shadows themselves. She realized she had learned much more than survival. She had learned to read hearts, to see intention, and to act decisively. As night fell, the danger returned. Scouts reported movement in the northern forest, dark figures, faster and more organized than the previous attackers. Kalen turned to her, gray eyes stormy but resolute. "This is it," he said, "the true test of our strength, courage, and unity. Are you ready?" Alara nodded. "I am." They rode into the night together, the wind whipping at their faces, the wolves running at their sides like shadows given life. The forest seemed alive, whispering around them, hiding both danger and secrets. Suddenly the figures appeared, armored men, cloaked in black, moving with precision and intent. But they were not ordinary men. Their movements were strange, almost unnatural, as if darkness itself had taken shape and walked. Kalen drew his sword, its edge glinting in the moonlight. "Stay close," he commanded. Alara's hands clenched, but she did not falter. She had trained for this, studied the forest, the shadows, the creatures of the night. She moved with awareness, guiding villagers and loyal guards to safety, using both her courage and her growing knowledge of the land. The battle was fierce. Shadows clashed with steel, arrows flew, and cries echoed through the trees. But Alara and Kalen fought not just with strength, but with understanding, trust, and coordination. Every move was precise, every action protective, every glance a silent instruction. At the heart of the fight, a figure emerged from the darkness, taller, cloaked in deeper black with eyes like fire. The leader of the attackers. Alara felt her pulse quicken. Kalen moved to intercept, but the figure struck with a speed that even he had not expected. Kalen staggered under the blow, pain etched across his face. Alara acted instantly, running forward to confront the figure. Her courage was raw, fierce, but her mind was clear. She dodged and struck, her movements guided by instinct and the lessons Kalen had taught her. "You are stronger than I expected," the figure hissed, circling her like a predator. Alara stood tall, fear and determination mingling in her chest. "I am not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady. "I will protect what is mine. I will protect him." The figure laughed, dark and hollow. "The king's choice will die tonight, and so will your chance at power." But before the figure could strike again, Kalen recovered, his sword flashing with precision and strength. Together, he and Alara fought, moving as one. Shadow met steel, darkness met light, and slowly the attackers were driven back. Finally, the leader fell, vanishing into the forest with a scream that chilled the night. Silence returned, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant howl of wolves. Kalen turned to Alara, his chest heaving but his eyes softening with pride and something deeper, gratitude, respect, and a quiet, growing affection. "You were incredible," he said. "You faced the darkness and did not waver. You have proven yourself not just to me, but to yourself." Alara's hands trembled, and she realized for the first time just how much she had grown. She was no longer the girl sold by her parents. She was no longer the frightened noble who had entered the castle weeks ago. She was a warrior of courage, a partner to a king, and a force to be reckoned with. Kalen reached out, taking her hand in his grip firm and steady. "And now," he said, his voice low and tender, "you must see what I see. You are not just chosen, you are equal. You are the heart that completes my kingdom." Alara's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of relief, pride, and something far deeper. She had been abandoned, sold, tested, and challenged. And now, in this moment, she was not only safe, but seen, valued, and loved. The castle behind them, the villages below, and the forests surrounding them were quiet once more. But the wind whispered secrets of the future, carrying the promise of new challenges, new adventures, and the knowledge that together they could face anything. Days passed and the kingdom slowly healed. The villagers rebuilt, loyal subjects renewed their oaths, and even the court began to recognize Alara not just as Kalen's chosen, but as a leader in her own right. Lord Murren, humbled by her courage, offered silent respect, though he remained cautious in his ambitions. Kalen and Alara spent long hours together, walking through the gardens, the forests, and the corridors of the castle. They spoke of duty, courage, the weight of power, and the quiet joys of connection. In each other they found not just trust, but companionship, understanding, and love, genuine, deep, and enduring. One evening, as the sun set in fire and gold, Kalen led Alara to the highest tower. Together, they looked out over the kingdom, the cliffs, the forests, the villages, and the distant mountains. "You have changed everything," Kalen said softly. "Not just the court, the villages, or the kingdom, but me. You have awakened a part of me I thought was lost forever." Alara smiled, leaning into him. "We have changed together," she said. "I was lost once, but you showed me strength, courage, and trust. And now we are stronger together." Kaelin turned, gray eyes locking with hers. "And I will protect you, always, not because you were chosen, but because I choose you." Her heart swelled with emotion. For the first time, she understood what it truly meant to be chosen, not as a prize, not as a pawn, but as a partner, equal in courage, spirit, and heart. As darkness fell over the cliffs, the wind carried the faint whispers of prophecy, but this time, Alara did not fear them. She had faced shadows, fought for survival, and stood beside the Alpha King. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. And as the moon rose over the fortress, silver and calm, the Alpha King and his chosen stood at the top of the world, a symbol of courage, love, and redemption. The kingdom was safe for now. Shadows remained, danger lingered, but together they could face anything. Alara pressed her hand against Kaelin's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She smiled, a mixture of relief, pride, and hope. "We are ready," she whispered. Kaelin nodded, gray eyes stormy yet tender. "Yes, together." And for the first time in her life, Alara felt whole, powerful, and truly free. The night had passed, the shadows had been faced, and the Alpha King had been redeemed, not by prophecy, but by the courage, love, and heart of the one he had chosen above all.